Hi, I'm James from Chaosium. I sat down with Mike Mason and we talked about what's coming next year. 2022 is going to be a big year for Call of Cthulhu, and Mike had a lot to share about what fans and players can expect. I'm going to jump across to that interview in just a moment. But first, remember to subscribe to the Chaosium YouTube channel. It helps us out and it lets us make more content like this. Thanks.
Okay, so this is a version of 2022 for everyone. It may change as things do in real life, and things priorities shift and so on. However, first of all, we will all the work that Lynn has been doing this year on the Rivers of London game comes to fruition next year, and we finally get to unleash the Rivers of London role-playing game on people. Now, it's not quite Call of Cthulhu, as in it's not Call of Cthulhu, it's its own thing with its own background and got its own vibe to it, but as anyone who's read the Ben's novels of the Rivers books will know, it's not a million miles away either from Call of Cthulhu, in terms of it's a game about spooky things, solving mysteries to some degree, but with a very different tone. So there is, we perceive there is a little bit of overlap. Some people who like Call of Cthulhu will probably like Rivers, and some people who like Rivers will probably like Call of Cthulhu too. So that's, everyone wins, hopefully. But Rivers will be coming out, next year. That's going to be really cool to see. But going into, true Call of Cthulhu, as it were, which one do I say first? I don't know. Well, the one. It becomes what am I actually working on today? Yeah, that's probably the first one, because I'm actually working on it now, and that is the first book in what is going to be retitled as a line of books called Arkham Unveiled. And Arkham Unveiled is a line of books, the first one being a book about Arkham. So Arkham, if you're not aware, is the fictional New England town created by Lovecraft, and described through his various tales. But it wasn't until Chaosium kind of put out the very first edition of Arkham Unveiled, which was its own book back in the day, that Arkham was kind of made into this vibrant, living town with people, NPCs and locations, and where they were in Arkham, what street were they on, what was the house number, and so on. And then a second edition came out a few years later called H.P. Lovecraft's Arkham, which was the same book but with a little bit more development, but essentially the same kind of material. And then that brings us up to here, and this new edition, which will be I guess will be called something like Arkham, the Legend Haunted City, and so what we have is a complete redevelopment of the original Arkham Unveiled book, which was written very well by Keith Herbert, one of my predecessors in terms of Call of Cthulhu line editors. And Keith had put this together and done an immense amount of work to kind of fit Arkham together as like a jigsaw piece to actually make it a realistic seeming town in New England in the 1920s. So what I have is the Keith's fantastic kind of base work, which is effectively unchanged in the new edition. But what I've been able to do is obviously to layer and build upon that to add further detail and information for keepers who want to use Arkham as a setting or campaigns. And more NPCs, some new buildings and so forth that have appeared over the years. If we want to kind of document in the Arkham book, more detail on the locations, and so forth. So it's basically an evolution of Keith's work in that way, and will be a very comprehensive book in terms of running games set in Arkham to starting your campaigns in Arkham, and just using a bit like Berlin, the Wicked City does, running games into Berlin and using Berlin as your backdrop, as your kind of extra character in the game. The city is the character. Arkham is very similar in that way, in that Arkham is a character in its own right, and obviously it allows us to also draw upon the original source material. So if you want to run some of the stories that Lovecraft originally wrote, or some of his contemporaries wrote set in Arkham, you can do that. If you want to run your version of Herbert West Reanimator, or The Thing on the Doorstep, and so on, you can. And indeed in the book there are references and bits of information to help you do that. That's something I've been working on. I am working on. And looking forward to do it. I've been getting artwork in by Wayne, and fantastic kind of new portraits and character images throughout the entire book, which are just fantastic. Also, once we get Arkham out, I will be following that up with Kingsport and Innsmouth and Dunwich and scenario collections about these places, so you can weave together a whole kind of Miskatonic Valley, the whole Miskatonic Valley basically. So that's kind of my main project almost for the next, well, more than 2022. It's going to take me longer to do the entire range, but there will be that, and we have some secret stuff that's being written that's brand new for this. So if I say the words Miskatonic University, wouldn't it be cool if day one of your campaign starts with you arriving as a freshman at Miskatonic University in 1922 or whenever it is, and the campaign then plays out till you leave university, and all the hijinks you may get up to by studying at a place in Arkham that's got the Orne Library, that's got a copy of the Necronomicon in it, that kind of thing. So there's some secret things happening in the background that will flow on from this source material I'm developing. So that's all very exciting. Now, the other big thing, that's only one big thing. The other big thing is something that people have been, hammering me about for some time. I get questions nearly every week. When is this coming out, Mike? And hopefully it's going to be 2022 is the answer. And what I'm talking about is Cthulhu by Gaslight. So we have Cthulhu by Gaslight has been redeveloped. We have how much shall I go into? It's a question, isn't it? But I'll tell you. Okay, but numerous people have contributed to the new edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight. We have the original material, obviously, and we built on that. Like we do with all our kind of new publications, is we look to add further value and useful information for keepers and players in these kind of books, and that's what we've done with Cthulhu by Gaslight. And because I was working on things like Cults of Cthulhu and Arkham and everything else, and Lynn's been busy with the fishing rod in the rivers of London, we've had some help from Keris MacDonald, who is a writer, an editor, and something of a bit of an authority on Victorian England, has helped us to kind of pull all the Gaslight material together to create what will be a new edition of Cthulhu by Gaslight. And one of the kind of slightly different things about this is it's going to be 2 books. So what we're going to do is a slightly different format, and we're going to produce a kind of player's guide to Cthulhu by Gaslight, which will include character generation. It will also include a kind of the basic Call of Cthulhu, the starter rules for Call of Cthulhu. So technically, if you're new to Call of Cthulhu, and the 1920s and so forth isn't your thing, but Victorian or Victoriana is your thing, and you think, actually, I want to give that a go, we want to try out putting out the player book where people can pick that up and they don't need to immediately go and buy the big Call of Cthulhu rulebook. So it's a slightly lower barrier to entry in that sense. And obviously, if they enjoy the game and they want to get more out of it, obviously they can then pick up a copy of the full rulebook and get all the monsters and the spells and all that kind of stuff and all the extra optional rules and all that kind of thing. But essentially, it's a starting place. You can pick up the player book for Cthulhu by Gaslight, be able to run the game, and this has also got all the information about occupations and Victorian London, what your character would know, and maps and so forth, and all that kind of useful stuff that is effectively a player-facing book, which obviously means The other book is a keeper-facing book, and it's the Keeper's Guide to, Cthulhu by Gaslight, and that's got all the mythos stuff, all the stuff you don't want your players to know straight away, some adventures and ideas for running, and all the stuff you would expect. But that's a separate book, so you don't necessarily have this problem of here's the book, go and make a character. Don't look at the second half of all the secret stuff. You can just get people to get their own, or let them borrow your player book and get into it. So we have those two coming out. I'm not quite sure whether one's going to follow the other, or whether they're going to come out at the same time, or I don't know yet. We haven't quite got that far, but at some point down the line, we'll be working on those and developing that. We've still got to do the art direction and so forth, but all being well, that all arrives in a suitable time span, and that means we can start to get those books out next year at some point. And what's really cool is we're going to follow them up, hopefully relatively quickly, with the Curse of Seven campaign, which is the Gaslight campaign. I don't think we've ever done a Gaslight campaign before. This is the first one Chaosium's done, and was headed by Penelope Love, supported by Mark Morrison, who are known for a lot of their work, particularly Horror in the Orient Express, but also a bunch of other writers who have contributed and developed this fantastic campaign that's set in the Gaslight era, and is awesome, because I've play tested it and run it, and we had a lot of fun doing it. So I'm looking forward to getting that out. And we also concurrently have a collection of scenarios as a separate book. So we have a campaign and a book of scenarios to exemplify the setting and make use of it, and to be your starting blocks, really, in terms of taking Cthulhu by Gaslight in the direction you want to take it, which will include the pulp variations and whatever else may be. So they're the two big things. The other kind of big thing, but big thing in a different way, is Chaosium Con, which is happening in April next year. And I think I can't remember the date, but sometime in April. It'll be on the website. But basically, which is the first kind of official Chaosium convention, and will be in a very cool place to hang out. And so I'm looking forward to going. Lynn and I live and work in England. A lot of our companions in the company, they work in the US or mainland Europe or Australia, and so getting together isn't always easy. So this will be a great opportunity to actually catch up with some of the people I work with every day virtually, face to face, and let alone meet people that play the games, and have a bit, maybe a little bit more time than usual. Most times at cons, it's all very rushed and busy, and you can get to sort of have a little chat with people, but it's pretty rushed because everyone's got a million things they're trying to do at the same time, or they've got to run off because their game's about to start or whatever. Whereas here, whilst all that's happening as well, there's a bit more, because it's not so big, it's not so frenetic. There's a lot more time to actually just hang and chat, and sit and shoot the breeze with players and keepers and so forth. So I'm really looking forward to that, and looking forward to seeing some old friends and making some new ones there. So Chaosium Con in April is all good, providing the gods permit foreign travel and the world hasn't blown up by then all good. So they're the highlights for 2022. There are other highlights that I couldn't possibly tell you, because if I did, I'd have to push you through a gate to Saturn or something. But there are other things, but they're big things, and they're going to take a while to kind of really tie up and finish. But so a lot of our focus is going to be on these products next year. But as ever, we will try and squeeze in a few, smaller ones, a few things as well. We have some great books that we've been sat on for a little while. The authors are, in my ear, giving me a hard time about when we're going to get them out, and I'm trying to get them out as quickly as I can. But everything takes time when especially when you're a small team, but we are working our socks off to try and not only get the books I've mentioned out, but many others as well. You know, just as soon as we can, do them justice, because I don't want to rush books in terms of just getting them out there. As you know, I want, you know, they've got to look good, they've got to read good, and we want fantastic art to go with them, to do the writer's work justice. That's what it's about. It's not just about making an attractive publication. We want to do justice to the people that have spent the time and crafted that scenario or crafted that setting book or whatever it may be, you know, to do them justice. And that's why it takes a little longer sometimes. But I think, you know, most people agree it's worth it in the end. So yeah, everything all exciting 2022.
There's so much cool stuff on the horizon, some of which I didn't know about. So I'm particularly excited to hear about it. I want to ask you a particularly vicious question just before we finish off. When we were talking about what was happening the year before, you said that a great way to sum up the year was that there was a bit of old and a bit of new. If you had to try and sum up what was going to come up in 2022 in kind of like a stylish way for Call of Cthulhu, this is the year of X, this is the year of Y, what do you think you'd say?
That's a hard one. I mean, I've just talked about two products that are basically reissues or new editions of. Some people will view those as redoing old books, and there is a good argument to say that is true. However, because I know the amount of work that's gone into them in terms of producing new material for them, new artwork throughout, new maps, new text, you know, on top of, you know, the development of the older text, there's an equal, if not more new, well, there's going to be more new material in those books than old material. They're not just a reprint like, say, Beyond the Mountains of Madness was this year, which is literally, you know, reformatted, but a reprint of an old campaign. These books I'm talking about have been completely redeveloped from the ground up. They are, in every essence, new, but yes, they do contain some old stuff in there as well. But, you know, I think most people would agree that Masks of Nathatep, yeah, there's the old campaign is in there, but there's a lot of new material in there as well to support that older material and actually push it up in terms of quality and playability. And it's like that, you know, we very rarely just shove a book out to shove a book out. We are all about making it the best it can be, not only visually, but what I spend all my time on is trying to make the text as user-friendly, as useful and informative as it can be. And so, you know, to my eyes, this is all new. So, I mean, it's that kind of strange thing. It's a bit of old and a bit new, 2022. However, the stuff I've not talked about that I'm hoping to kind of squeeze in between, you know, between and at the end of some of these projects are new books, apart from one of them. One of them, again, it's got some old stuff and some new stuff, a bit like Mansions of Madness was. But there are some other books that are completely brand new and will be very exciting to see coming out. We have, I mean, I'm going to start talking about them now, and I can't. I've got to stop myself because, you know, it'll all become crazy if I do that. So, yeah, so yes, I think difficult to categorize a year until it's happened. I would genuinely need to get my my scrying crystal out or the Ouija board and ask the unseen ones what is actually going to happen. But they tend to lie a lot of the time and misinform me. So it's not a good idea to, you know, do what they say. You have to not listen to the voices.